"You're just a burden to this family," my sister spat as she took over my room. "Nobody wants you here," her husband added. I didn't say a word, just packed my things quietly. The next morning, their picture-perfect life fell apart. I've always been the quiet one, the observer in the family, watching life unfold like a series of paintings, each stroke revealing more about the characters than they'd ever admit. My name is Rachel, and at 28 years old, I never imagined I'd be in this situation. Here I am, living with my sister Emily and her husband Mark in a modest suburban home in Ohio. Emily, with her golden hair and perfect smile, had everything handed to her on a silver platter, including her marriage to Mark, a successful real estate agent. Their life seemed perfect, with their matching BMWs and the white picket fence. But beneath this veneer, there was always a tension, a silent competition that I never quite understood. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at my job as a graphic designer, I returned home. The house was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that precedes a storm. As I walked through the door, I noticed something was off. My room, my sanctuary, had been transformed. The walls, once adorned with my art, now bore the soft pastels of a nursery. Emily stood there, her arms crossed, a smug look on her face. "You're just a burden to this family," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "We need the space for our future." Mark, standing behind her, his face a mask of indifference, added, "Nobody wants you here." The words hit like a physical blow, each syllable a reminder of my place in this family, or rather, my lack thereof. I felt the room spin, my heart pounding in my chest. The betrayal was palpable, the air thick with unspoken accusations and years of silent rivalry. Emily's eyes, cold and calculating, seemed to challenge me, daring me to react. In that moment, I had a choice. Confront them, unleash the years of pent-up frustration, or leave in silence, preserving some semblance of dignity. The silence stretched, heavy and oppressive. I chose silence, not because I was weak, but because I knew the power of silence. It was my canvas now, and I would paint my exit with the strokes of my own choosing. I turned away from them, my mind, racing with plans, with possibilities. I walked to my now empty room, the nursery mocking me with its innocence. I packed what little I could call mine, each item a reminder of a life I thought I was building here. As I zipped up my suitcase, I could hear Emily and Mark whispering, their voices a mix of relief and perhaps a tinge of guilt. With my belongings in hand, I walked out of the house, the door closing behind me with a finality that echoed in the quiet street. The night air was cool against my flushed cheeks, the stars above indifferent to the drama below. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was leaving behind the shadows of expectations and the weight of unfulfilled promises. As I walked down the street, my steps firm and resolute, I felt the first stirrings of freedom. The road ahead was unknown, but it was mine to navigate. Without a word, I packed my things. The silence in the house was deafening as I moved around, collecting my belongings. Emily watched with a cold detachment, her eyes following my every move like a hawk. Mark, on the other hand, was absorbed in his phone, his fingers dancing over the screen, avoiding my gaze as if I were already a ghost in this house. I felt the weight of their words, the sting of rejection from the only family I had left. With my bags packed, I left the house, the door closing with a finality that echoed through the empty hallway. I drove to a local motel, the kind with flickering neon signs that promised a night's rest in exchange for a few crumpled bills. The air was thick with the scent of stale cigarettes and old carpet as I checked in. The room was small, the walls a faded yellow, the bed sagging in the middle, but it was mine, at least for now. As I settled into this temporary refuge, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony of my situation. Here I was, alone, but somehow I felt freer than I had in years. The silence of the motel room was different from the oppressive silence of the house. It was a silence that whispered of possibilities, of new beginnings. I lay back on the bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and let my mind wander. What secrets did my departure unlock? The first secret was the realization that I had been living in a shadow, not just of Emily's perfect life, but of my own fears and insecurities. I had always been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over the rough edges of family disputes, who absorbed the brunt of their unspoken resentments. Now, with no one to please but myself, I felt a strange lightness, as if I had shed an invisible burden. The second secret was the understanding of my own resilience. The pain of their rejection was real, but so was the strength I found in solitude. I remembered the nights spent in my room, sketching out designs, pouring my heart into art that was never appreciated by them. Here, in this motel room, I could see the potential of those sketches, the possibility of turning them into something more than just a hobby. And then there was the secret of their relationship. Emily and Mark, with their perfect exterior, had always seemed like a match made in heaven, but the whispers I heard as I packed, the tension that had always simmered beneath their smiles, suggested otherwise. Perhaps my departure was not just about making room for a nursery, but about escaping the confines of their own making. Maybe, just maybe, my leaving was the catalyst they needed to confront the truths they had been avoiding. As I lay there, the neon light from outside casting a soft glow across the room, I realized something else. My silence, my choice to leave, without a confrontation, was not just about preserving dignity. It was about reclaiming my narrative. For two, the next morning, I received a call from a neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, a sweet elderly woman who always had a kind word. Her voice was shaky. "Rachel, dear, something terrible has happened. You need to come back." My heart raced as I drove back to the house, the morning sun casting long shadows on the road. Upon arrival, I found chaos. Police cars lined the street, their lights flashing. Emily and Mark were being led out of the house in handcuffs. The nursery, my former room, was now a crime scene. It turned out that Mark had been embezzling money from his clients, and Emily, knowing about it, had been using the funds to finance their lavish lifestyle. The nursery was a facade, a cover for their financial misdeeds. I stood there, watching, as they were escorted to the police cars. Emily's eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of regret, or perhaps it was fear. Mark, on the other hand, kept his gaze fixed on the ground, his face a mask of defeat. The neighbors, drawn by the commotion, whispered among themselves, their faces a mix of shock and satisfaction. As the police began to question me, I recounted the events of the previous night. I told them about the transformation of my room, the harsh words, and my silent departure. They listened intently, taking notes, their expressions somber. The officer in charge, a stern-looking woman with sharp eyes, asked, "Did you suspect anything was off with their finances?" I shook my head. "No, not really. They always seem to have money, but I thought it was from Mark's real estate business. I never imagined it was from this." The house, once a symbol of suburban perfection, now looked like a stage set for a tragedy. The white picket fence seemed to mock the scene, its pristine paint a stark contrast to the unfolding drama. As I walked through the house, now a crime scene, I felt a strange detachment. The nursery, with its pastel walls and baby furniture, was a stark reminder of the lies that had been painted over my life. The police had taped off areas marking evidence, their movements methodical and precise. I overheard snippets of conversation. The money trail leads back to several high-profile clients. They've been living beyond their means for years. It's all here in the nursery, hidden in plain sight. The realization hit me like a wave. Emily and Mark, with their perfect smiles and matching cars, had been living a lie. Their life, which I had envied, was built on deceit, and now their secrets were out, exposed for all to see. I stepped outside, the cool morning air a relief from the stifling atmosphere inside. Mrs. Thompson approached me, her face etched with concern. "Oh, Rachel, I had no idea. They seemed so normal." I managed a weak smile. "I guess we all wear masks, Mrs. Thompson. Some just fit better than others." The police continued their work, and I watched as Emily and Mark were driven away, their future uncertain. The weight of their actions would now dictate the path they would walk. As for me, I felt a mix of emotions. There was relief, knowing I had escaped a life built on lies, but there was also sadness for the family I thought I had, for the sister I thought I knew. I turned away from the scene, the sun now high, casting light where shadows once dominated. My steps were slow, each one a step away from the past, towards a future I would define. The road ahead was mine to navigate, and for the first time, I felt truly free to choose my direction, unburdened by the expectations of others. The silence of my departure had spoken volumes, and now, with their secrets revealed, I could start anew, with the truth as my companion. The news spread like wildfire through our small community. Emily and Mark's arrest was the talk of the town, their fall from grace swift and brutal. I watched from the sidelines, a mix of relief and sadness washing over me. The once pristine image of their life was now shattered, the pieces scattered for all to see. I visited Mrs. Thompson, who filled me in on the details. Her living room was warm, the scent of her homemade cookies lingering in the air, but the atmosphere was heavy with the weight of the revelations. Mark's clients had started noticing discrepancies in their accounts, leading to an investigation that uncovered years of fraud. Mrs. Thompson, with her gentle eyes, looked at me with a sorrow that mirrored my own. As I sat with her, sipping tea, she handed me an envelope. "This was meant for you, dear. Emily left it in my care before everything." Inside was a letter from Emily, her handwriting shaky, as if each word was a struggle to write. She apologized for her harsh words, revealing her own insecurities and the pressure she felt to maintain their perfect image. "Rachel," the letter began, "I know I've been harsh, and for that, I'm truly sorry. The truth is, I've always felt like I had to be perfect, to live up to an image that was never really mine. Mark and we got caught in this cycle of needing more, of wanting to show the world we were something we weren't. I see now how that hurt you, how it pushed you away. I hope one day you can forgive me." Reading her words, I felt a pang of empathy. Emily, who always seemed so confident, was just as lost as I was, perhaps even more so. Her confession laid bare the vulnerabilities she had hidden behind her perfect facade. The question loomed large in my mind. Will Rachel forgive her sister, or is the damage too deep? I folded the letter, my thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. Forgiveness seemed like a distant shore, one I wasn't sure I could reach. The betrayal was still fresh, the sting of their words and actions still sharp. Yet, there was a part of me that understood her struggle, the same part that had always tried to bridge the gap between us. I looked out of Mrs. Thompson's window, the street outside quiet, the normalcy of the neighborhood a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. The house where I had lived, where I had felt both at home and out of place, was now just a crime scene, a testament to the lies that had been lived there. Mrs. Thompson placed her hand on mine, her touch comforting. "Life is complex, Rachel. People make mistakes, sometimes grave ones. But remember, forgiveness isn't just for them. It's for you too. It's about letting go of the weight that holds you back." Her words resonated with me, echoing the thoughts I had in the motel room. The silence of my departure had been my statement, my reclaiming of my narrative. Now, with Emily's letter in hand, I was at another crossroads. I stood up, feeling the weight of the decision before me. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "I need some time to think, to decide what this means for me, for us." As I walked out of her house, the sun was setting, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch towards my past. The road ahead was still mine to navigate, but now with Emily's confession, it felt like a new path was emerging, one that might lead to reconciliation or further estrangement. The choice was mine, and as I walked down the street, the cool evening air brushing against my face, I felt the first stirrings of a decision forming. Forgiveness was not about erasing the past, but about choosing how to move forward. And in that moment, I chose to consider it, to give myself the chance to heal, to perhaps find a way back to my sister, or at least to find peace with the memory of who she was. The silence of my departure had spoken volumes, and now with their secrets revealed, I could start anew. With the letter in hand, I returned to the house, now eerily quiet. The police had left and the nursery was sealed off. I sat in the living room reading Emily's words over and over. The house, once filled with laughter and pretense, now echoed with the truth. I realized that Emily's cruelty stemmed from her own fears and the pressure she felt to live up to an unattainable standard. I made a decision. I would not let their downfall define me. Instead, I would rebuild my life, free from the shadows of their expectations. I called a real estate agent, not Mark, to list the house for sale. The money from the sale would give me a fresh start, far away from here. As I waited for the agent to arrive, I walked through the house, each room a gallery of memories, some sweet, others bitter. The living room where we used to watch movies together, now just a space filled with furniture. The kitchen, where Emily would cook, her laughter ringing out, now silent. The echoes of our past seemed to whisper through the walls, urging me to move on. The real estate agent, a woman named Laura, arrived promptly. She was professional, her demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded here. "I understand the circumstances," she said, her voice soft yet firm. "Let's make this as smooth as possible for you." We toured the house together, Laura noting down features and potential selling points. I felt detached, like a spectator in my own life. When we reached the nursery, the tape still across the door, Laura paused. "We'll need to address this," she said, her eyes scanning the room through the open doorway. "I know," I replied, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. It was my room before." Laura nodded, understanding the unspoken history. "We'll stage it as a guest room. It'll be better for potential buyers." The staging was quick, the transformation of the space from a crime scene to a neutral, inviting room. It was like watching my life being rewritten, the past being painted over with fresh, impersonal colors. After Laura left, I sat in the now empty living room, the house feeling more like a shell than a home. I thought about Emily's letter, her words of regret and fear. The complexity of our relationship, the love mixed with rivalry, it all seemed to condense into that moment. I decided to visit the local art supply store. Art had always been my escape, my way of expressing what words couldn't. As I walked through the aisles, the vibrant colors and textures of the materials sparked something within me. I bought canvases, paints, brushes, and some new sketchbooks. Back at the motel, I set up a small workspace. The room, once a place of temporary refuge, now became a studio of sorts. I started painting, not with the intention to sell or even show anyone, but to reclaim a part of myself that had been overshadowed by my family's drama. Each stroke was a step towards healing, towards defining who I was outside of Emily and Mark's shadow. Days turned into weeks, and the house sold quickly, thanks to Laura's efforts. The money was more than enough for a fresh start. I chose a small, coastal town known for its artistic community. The idea of starting anew, where nobody knew my past, was both terrifying and exhilarating. As I packed my belongings, including my new art supplies, I felt a lightness, a shedding of the old. I left a note for Mrs. Thompson, thanking her for her kindness and understanding. "I'm moving on," I wrote, "but I'll carry the lessons with me." Driving away from the town, from the house, from the memories, I felt the road ahead was not just a path to a new place, but a journey into a new self. The silence of my departure had spoken volumes, and now, with their secrets revealed, I could start anew, with the truth as my companion. I would not let their downfall define me. Instead, I would rebuild my life, free from the shadows of their expectations. The money from the house sale would give me a fresh start, far away from here. Months later, I stood in front of a quaint cottage by the sea, the salty breeze welcoming me to my new beginning. The house was modest, but mine, bought with the proceeds from the sale of the old family home. I had started freelancing, my work gaining traction, and I felt a sense of accomplishment I'd never known before. The quiet town with its cobblestone streets and the distant sound of waves was a stark contrast to the chaos I had left behind. I received a letter from Emily, now in prison, asking for forgiveness. Her words were filled with regret, a stark contrast to the harshness she had shown me. I wrote back, not with anger, but with understanding. We all make mistakes, I wrote, but it's how we choose to move forward that defines us. I sealed the envelope, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders, a step towards healing. As I watched the sunset over the ocean, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink, I realized that sometimes the people who make you feel small are the ones who fall hardest. But it's up to us to rise above, to find our own path, and to live not in their shadows, but in our own light. The ocean's vastness reminded me of the endless possibilities ahead. What does Rachel's future hold now that she has truly found herself? The cottage, with its weathered shingles and a small garden, was more than just a house. It was a symbol of my independence, my resilience. I had transformed the space into a studio where I could paint and design, free from the judgments and expectations of others. Each brushstroke on the canvas was a declaration of my freedom, each design a testament to my creativity. I had made friends in the town, people who appreciated art and the simple joys of life. There was a local cafe where I would sit for hours, sketching, the aroma of fresh coffee mingling with the sea air. The owner, a kind woman named Clara, often shared stories of her travels, inspiring me to think about my own adventures. My work was beginning to get noticed. An art gallery in the nearby city had expressed interest in showcasing my pieces. The thought of my art hanging on gallery walls, seen and appreciated by strangers, was both exhilarating and daunting. It was a validation of my journey, a sign that I was on the right path. I often thought about Emily and Mark, their lives now dictated by the consequences of their actions. Emily's letter had opened a door to forgiveness, not just for her, but for myself. I understood now that her cruelty was a mask for her own insecurities, her need to be seen as perfect. Forgiving her was not about condoning what she did, but about releasing myself from the burden of resentment. The town's annual art festival was approaching, and I decided to participate. It was an opportunity to share my story, not through words, but through my art. I prepared a series of paintings, each one capturing a moment of my journey from the shadows of my past to the light of my present. The theme was clear: transformation, resilience, and the beauty of starting anew. On the day of the festival, the town was alive with color and music. My booth was modest, but the paintings spoke volumes. People stopped, drawn by the emotion in each piece. I watched as they connected with my story, their eyes reflecting understanding and sometimes their own stories of overcoming. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the festival, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had not only rebuilt my life, but had also found a community where I belonged. The applause and the kind words from visitors were not just for the art, but for the journey I had undertaken. I realized then that my future was not just about what I would create or where I would go, but about who I had become. The journey from the shadows of my family's expectations to the light of my own making was my greatest masterpiece. Here in this small coastal town, surrounded by art and the gentle whispers of the sea, I had truly found myself. And as I looked out over the ocean, the future seemed not just bright, but limitless. I was no longer defined by the past, but by don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.